From underdog teams that found a way in to the best that couldn't finish the job, the Super Bowls have delivered a vast collection of rosters in all shapes and forms.
Big ass. Oh, me?
So let's hit rewind and rank every Super Bowl losing team in history. We'll start out with the 1979 Rams. LA won 4 of its last 5 games to get into the playoffs, then upset the heavily favored Cowboys in the divisional round.
Gets it to Roddy. He's gonna go.
The Rams were 9-7 with a plus 14-point differential, the third lowest of any Super Bowl team. They played the Steelers tough that day, but ultimately fell 31-19. Next up, the 1994 Chargers, who upset Pittsburgh in the AFC title game.
Fire down.
San Diego went 11-5 that year with a top 10 scoring offense and defense, but the Chargers won their 2 playoff games by 5 combined points and ran into the buzzsaw known as the 1994 49ers in Super Bowl 29. We all remember the 1985 Patriots as the team that got blown out by Chicago in the Super Bowl. Yes, it was ugly, but don't discount this squad totally. New England had the 6th best scoring defense in the league and allowed just 14 passing touchdowns. Patriots also topped Dan Marino's Dolphins on the road in the AFC Championship game.
The 6th turnover of the game for the Patriots.
The Pats sent 8 players to the Pro Bowl that year, and 2 of them went on to Canton. The team that produced The Drive takes the next spot on our list.
Touchdown, Mark Jackson.
This Denver team had a flair for the dramatic, winning 7 games by 7 points or less if you include the playoffs. They were only plus 51 in point differential, and their flaws were on display in a Super Bowl 21 blowout loss to the Giants. Speaking of the G-Men, the 2000 team was all about defense.
And the pass is almost picked up. It is picked up.
New York allowed just 15 points per game and boasted the league's 2nd best run defense. Tiki Barber and Ron Dane combined for over 2,500 total yards, and Big Blue plowed their way through the playoffs. That is, until they met Ray Lewis and the Ravens in Super Bowl 35. The Cardiac Cats made the most of every opportunity in 2003. The Panthers played 20 total games that season. 14 of them were decided by 6 points or less.
And the Carolina Panthers win in overtime.
Carolina finished 11-5 and rode a wave of momentum into a thrilling Super Bowl 38 against the Patriots. Sadly, a last-second loss ended their improbable run. Same goes for the 08 Cardinals, who leaned on the combo of Kurt Warner and Larry Fitzgerald all the way to Super Bowl 43.
Fitzgerald into Steeler territory.
Arizona went 9-7 with a plus 1 point differential, the lowest of any team to lose a Super Bowl. Fitzgerald set postseason records with 30 catches, 546 yards, and 7 touchdowns in just 4 games, but it was all for naught as Santonio Holmes dashed the Cardinals' title hopes with that legendary toe tap. 1 year after The Drive, Denver produced another all-time postseason moment.
Fumble the ball, and Denver has recovered. Oh, my.
Ernest Biner's fumble helped send the 1987 Broncos back to the Super Bowl. In fact, Denver finished with 47 takeaways that season, 3rd most in the NFL. John Elway won league MVP, guiding a top 5 scoring offense, but all that went out the window in the second quarter of Super Bowl 22. Washington poured on 5 touchdowns in a 42-10 rout.
I've never seen 34 points in one quarter by one team.
Led by comeback player of the year Joe Burrow, the 2021 Bengals won 3 tightly contested playoff games to reach Super Bowl 56.
And Cincinnati is heading to the Super Bowl.
At just 10-7, Cincinnati's record was nothing to write home about, but Burrow and fellow LSU alum Jamar Chase were dynamite all season. Chase won Offensive Rookie of the Year with 13 touchdowns, but the Bengals ran into Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, and the Rams, falling in a nail-biting Super Bowl. The 1995 season saw a blast from the past with a Cowboys-Steelers Super Bowl clash. Unfortunately for Pittsburgh fans, they were on the wrong end of this one, but that doesn't mean their season was a failure. The Steelers had 8 wins by double digits, finishing 11-5. They scored 25 points per game, 5th most in the NFL, and sported the league's number 2 rushing defense, not too shabby. The upstart 1996 Patriots were still a team in the making. Their top passer, rusher, and receiver were all 24 or younger. Not to mention 22-year-old Ty Law and 25-year-old Willie McGinnis, who led the team in sacks. New England had 6 Pro Bowlers and the second-best scoring offense in the league.
Spot inside the 5, and he's in for the touchdown.
But Bill Parcells' young team wasn't on the same level as a dominant Packers squad in the Super Bowl. Despite their best efforts, the Patriots fell short 35-21. The '92 Bills take our next spot. Buffalo's third straight Super Bowl trip turned into a total disaster. 9 turnovers and a 52-17 demolition. But let's backtrack.
Look at him hide and then cut forward and score!
Running back Thurman Thomas racked up the most yards from scrimmage in the NFL. The Bills won 11 games and also sent 11 players to the Pro Bowl. When Jim Kelly went down before the wild card game, backup Frank Reich engineered the largest comeback in playoff history. It wasn't the best of those Bills teams, but they got to the dance. Defense, defense, defense. That was the mantra of the 1989 Broncos. They allowed the fewest points and passing touchdowns of any team in the NFL. Denver also forced 43 turnovers, second most in the league.
The pass is intercepted. Big play.
But none of that carried over to Super Bowl 24. After allowing just 14 points per game in the regular season, the Broncos gave up 55 to San Francisco in a night to forget. Jump ahead to 1999, where the 13-3 Titans fell just 1 yard short of their first ever Lombardi Trophy. Tennessee had that stellar backfield duo of Steve McNair and Eddie George, not to mention Defensive Rookie of the Year Javon Curse. The Freak still holds the rookie record for sacks in a season, and come playoff time, they pulled off the greatest return in NFL history.
He gives it to Wycheck. Wycheck, that looked like a forward pass. Taken by Dyson. Dyson down the sideline. Dyson's going to go all the way. And there is no flag.
Miami's 1982 team dismantled their 3 AFC opponents in an expanded 16-team playoff. The Dolphins' #1 total defense was rock solid, allowing just 114 passing yards per game.
Intercepted, and that's trying to be a touchdown. A.J. Dewey. What a day for Dewey.
Don Shula's squad battled in Super Bowl 17 but couldn't bring down MVP John Riggins and suffered a 10-point loss at the hands of Washington. Matt Ryan quarterbacked the top scoring offense in the league en route to winning 2016 MVP. Atlanta put up nearly 34 points per game as Ryan posted an NFL-high 117 passer rating.
Julio Jones still on his feet.
Julio Jones led all receivers with 100 yards per game, while Vic Beasley topped the league with 15.5 sacks. The Falcons cruised to Super Bowl 51, where the comeback of all comebacks did them in. The 1977 Broncos and their Orange Crush defense allowed just over 10 points per game. Helps when you have 4 All-Pros on that side of the ball.
In '77, the Orange Crush looked better than ever. The Broncos breezed through November with 4 consecutive wins.
Denver went 12-2, giving up the fewest rush yards and rushing touchdowns in the league, but come Super Bowl 12, their offense, or lack thereof, was a huge problem. The Broncos committed 8 turnovers in an ugly 27-10 defeat. The 4th straight AFC Championship season for Buffalo resulted in another disappointing Super Bowl outcome, but let's take a deeper dive into that '93 Bills squad. They produced 47 takeaways, most in the NFL, thanks in large part to cornerback Nate Odoms, who tied for a league-high 9 picks.
Nate Odoms is 9th of the year.
Buffalo sent 7 players to the Pro Bowl in another stellar campaign. NFL MVP Ken Anderson led Cincinnati to their first ever Super Bowl in 1981. The Bengals finished 12-4 with the #3 scoring offense in the league.
Anderson, wide open is Collinsworth.
Anderson had the NFL's best passer rating that year, but it was Joe Montana who got the better of him in Super Bowl 16 as Cincinnati fell 26-21. The unique 2020 season brought about challenges across the league, but Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs picked up right where they left off in their title defense. KC went 14-2 with 7 Pro Bowlers on the roster.
Mahomes down the field, yes!
Patrick Mahomes averaged 316 passing yards per game, leading the Chiefs to Super Bowl 55. Unfortunately, Tom Brady and the Bucs awaited. Kansas City couldn't get out of their own way, losing 31-9 in a total dud.
That's it for KC.
The young genius Sean McVay led LA to Super Bowl 53 in just his 2nd season as head coach. These Rams had star power and one of the best offenses in the league.
Inside the 20. He is gone.
Todd Gurley scored 21 touchdowns, most in the league. Aaron Donald racked up 20.5 sacks, winning Defensive Player of the Year for the second time. After going 13-3, LA stunned the Saints in the NFC Championship game before losing to the Patriots in the lowest scoring Super Bowl ever. An MVP quarterback and 4 future Hall of Famers led the 2002 Raiders to their first Super Bowl appearance since 1983. Rich Gannon led the league in passing yards. Helps when you have vets like Tim Brown and Jerry Rice.
You think Jerry Rice can't go deep anymore, and then boom, they hit you with the deep one.
Oakland was fantastic on the other side of the ball too. Rod Woodson had 8 picks, tied for most in the NFL, but their former coach and one of the greatest defenses ever were waiting in Super Bowl 37. Gannon threw 3 pick sixes in a rough night for the Silver and Black. Rewind back to 1971. In his second year in Miami, Don Shula already had the Dolphins in position to win it all.
Unitas goes deep, hits is there, and it's knocked away.
This was a Miami squad with a top 5 offense and defense and 7 players named to the Pro Bowl. They compiled the most rushing yards in the league while committing the fewest turnovers. A precursor to the perfect 1972 season, this campaign didn't finish as joyful. The Finns were blasted 24-3 in a Super Bowl VI loss to Dallas. Those 70s Cowboys teams were absolutely stacked. The 75 team featured 6 future Hall of Fame players and another 4 coaching or in the front office. This was a well-oiled machine that finished top 10 in points and points allowed, but they still needed a miracle to win their first playoff game.
Down the near sideline for Drew Pearson. Pearson makes the catch at the 5, touchdown!
Roger Staubach's Hail Mary sent Dallas to the NFC title game where they dominated the Rams. In Super Bowl X, a rivalry was born. The Cowboys and Steelers battled in a thriller at the Orange Bowl, with Pittsburgh securing a narrow 21-17 win. Super Bowl 15 saw the Raiders crush Philadelphia, but don't sleep on those 1980 Eagles. That team had a plus 162 point differential and the top scoring defense in the league. They allowed just 8 rushing touchdowns and won 11 of their first 12 games.
No, he didn't make it.
Ball is loose, picking it up was Jerry Robinson.
Philly went on to make their first appearance in a Super Bowl or championship game since 1960. History repeated itself with the 80s Bengals. 7 years after Ken Anderson won NFL MVP, Boomer Esiason did the same thing, taking Cincinnati to Super Bowl 23. Boomer led the top-scoring offense in the league with an NFL high passer rating.
Now he goes far down the field. There's Eddie Brown, touchdown! Down to the 10-5, he is gone.
The Bengals had 9 Pro Bowlers, and rookie Ickey Woods led the #1 rushing offense in the NFL. But just like that 81 team, Cincinnati would fall to the 49ers on the big stage. Washington's 1972 team was one of their best ever. Unfortunately, they ran into the perfect team in the big game. While that narrow loss in Super Bowl VII was damaging, let's look back at a supreme squad people seem to forget about.
Down the line of scrimmage. He hits for the end zone, touchdown!
Running back Larry Brown won NFL MVP, gaining the most yards from scrimmage in the league. Washington went 11-3, sporting a top 10 scoring offense and defense. Bud Grant's Vikings teams of the 60s and 70s were outstanding in every way, yet they could never get over the hump. Minnesota lost 4 Super Bowls from 1969 to 1976, and we'll spotlight the 74 team here.
And once again, the man of the hour was number 44, Chuck Foreman.
In just his second season, running back Chuck Foreman led the NFL with 15 touchdowns. This was a team with 6 future Hall of Famers and one hell of a defense. The Vikings allowed just 8 passing touchdowns all year, fewest in the league, but the Purple People Eaters were no match for Franco Harris and the Steelers in the Super Bowl, falling 16-6. What do you get when you mix one of the best pass defenses in the NFL with one of the most potent rushing attacks? A trip to Super Bowl 54.
Their first down carry and more. How about a touchdown?
San Francisco's 23 rushing touchdowns were tops in the NFL. Meanwhile, George Kittle and Deebo Samuel helped lead the second-best scoring offense in the league. Defensive end Nick Bosa won Defensive Rookie of the Year in a fantastic 13-3 campaign. Unfortunately, the Niners couldn't hold on to a 10-point lead in the Super Bowl, losing to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. With a 10-4 record and mediocre point differential, the 1970 Cowboys don't seem to deserve this spot at first glance. But when you factor in 9 future Hall of Famers on the roster, coached by the legendary Tom Landry, you can understand why they're here.
And it's intercepted by Adderley.
3 of Dallas's 4 starting defensive backs are now in Canton. The Cowboys allowed just 10 passing touchdowns in 1970, second fewest in the league. They turned Super Bowl V into a downright ugly game, ultimately losing in the final seconds on a Jim O'Brien field goal. Back we go to Minnesota, where the 1976 Vikings boasted an 11-2-1 powerhouse.
Their defense is never fooled and rarely gives up a long touchdown play.
The defense allowed just 12.6 points per game. They also ranked first against the pass and gave up the fewest touchdowns through the air of any team that season. On the other side of the ball, receiver Sammy White won Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Chuck Foreman's 14 scores tied for the league high. But even a team with 8 Pro Bowlers had no answers for the silver and black in Super Bowl XI. The 2010 Steelers were looking to win their 3rd Super Bowl in a 6-year span. This Pittsburgh defense was straight up scary.
20, 10, touchdown.
Number 1 in scoring defense, number 1 in rushing defense, and they gave up only 5 rushing touchdowns all season. Pittsburgh's plus 17 turnover differential was second best in the league. The Steelers had it all going for them. That is until they faced Aaron Rodgers and the Packers in Super Bowl 45. A-Rod torched their vaunted defense with 304 yards and 3 touchdowns. 9 Pro Bowlers and 6 All-Pros, including 4 on defense. Yeah, the 2012 49ers were loaded. And not only did they survive an injury to their starting quarterback, they actually got better.
Kaepernick keeps it. Fooled everybody.
Colin Kaepernick was a brilliant dual-threat quarterback after taking over the starting job in Week 11. On defense, there was talent everywhere. Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, Alden Smith, and Deshaun Goldson were all pros. But the Niners came out flat in Super Bowl 47 and couldn't overcome a 22-point deficit despite a furious late comeback. There's a great chance we're talking about the 2009 Colts as the second team to go 16-0 in the regular season. Indy started 14-0 but rested their starters in the last 2 games. Peyton Manning was off the charts again, winning MVP with a league-high 7-game winning drives.
For the end zone. Touchdown.
The Colts had 3 players with 10 or more touchdowns: Reggie Wayne, Joseph Adai, and Dallas Clark. After breezing by their first 2 playoff opponents, Indy would come up short in a 31-17 loss in Super Bowl 44. Powered by Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, the 2011 Patriots scored 32 points per game. They're one of only 28 teams in history to score 500 points in a season.
Stays in bounds. Touchdown.
Brady passed for over 5,200 yards, while Gronk set a single-season tight end record with 17 touchdown receptions. This New England unit went 13-3 and featured 8 Pro Bowlers, but Eli and the Giants were waiting in Super Bowl 46, and down went the Patriots again. Buffalo's second AFC title team was carried by Thurman Thomas. The Bills went 13-3, and the league MVP racked up over 2,000 yards from scrimmage.
Kelly throws high, and Thomas is there. Thurman Thomas.
Buffalo had the NFL's top rushing offense, while Jim Kelly's 33 touchdown passes were the most in the league. The Bills were no slouch on defense either. They gave up only 12 passing touchdowns, the fewest of any team. However, that secondary met its match in Super Bowl 26. QB Mark Rippon shredded the Bills in a 37-24 Washington win. A top 5 scoring offense and defense, and the GOAT-winning MVP had to be another Super Bowl season for the Patriots, right?
Throws it. Did he get the feet down? What an effort!
Tom Brady finished atop the league in passing as the offense put up nearly 29 points per game. Gronk was once again all-pro with over 1,000 yards. Bill Belichick's defense gave up only 6 scores on the ground, the second fewest in the league. But they were tested big time in Super Bowl 52. Nick Foles and the Eagles had their way to the tune of 538 yards on offense and 41 points.
An exceptional team that missed out on hoisting the Lombardi Trophy, the 2023 49ers were balanced, efficient, and explosive.
Trying to do something here with Christian McCaffrey.
Christian McCaffrey paced the NFL with over 2,000 yards from scrimmage and tied for a league-high 21 touchdowns. Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, turned into a bona fide MVP candidate, producing an NFL-high 113 passer rating. The Niners also had the third-ranked total defense and a plus 197-point differential. But for the second time in 5 seasons, San Francisco had its Super Bowl hopes dashed by Patrick Mahomes. It's arguably the second-best Bears team in the Super Bowl era. Chicago could do it all in 2006. Number 1 in takeaways, number 2 in scoring offense, number 3 in scoring defense, and a record-setting rookie returner.
Devin Hester into the open field. Devin Hester, the punter to beat. He beat him.
Devin Hester scored 7 return touchdowns, including the opening kickoff of Super Bowl 41. But there was no getting around it. Chicago's Achilles heel was quarterback Rex Grossman, who turned the ball over 30 times in 2006, if you count the playoffs. His sloppy play on a rainy night in Miami doomed the Bears on the big stage. Led by the great Hank Stram, the Chiefs franchise had already captured an AFL title in 1962, but Super Bowl I was about putting the upstart league on the map. Kansas City went 11-2-1 in 1966 with a potent offense.
Perhaps the most elusive runner in the league skips loose from 2 desperation tackle attempts and scores.
The Chiefs averaged 32 points per game, a team single-season record until some guy named Patrick Mahomes showed up. Len Dawson tossed an AFL-high 26 touchdowns on a team featuring 7 future Hall of Famers, if you count Stram and owner Lamar Hunt. While the inaugural Super Bowl didn't go their way, Kansas City went on to win the Lombardi Trophy in 1969, 1 year before the AFL-NFL merger. In their 4th straight year of making the NFC Championship game, the Eagles finally broke through in 2004. Led by a brash addition at wideout, Philly went 13-3, sending 10 players to the Pro Bowl.
He's going for Owens in the end zone. Touchdown!
Terrell Owens was named first-team All-Pro with 14 touchdown catches. Led by future Hall of Famer Brian Dawkins, the defense allowed the second fewest points in the league. Andy Reid's team gave their all in Super Bowl 39, including Owens gutting it out on a broken leg. But it wasn't meant to be, as the Eagles fell to the mighty Patriots 24-21. Fast forward 18 years, where another Philadelphia squad finished just 3 points shy of a Lombardi, but regardless of the narrow defeat, the 2022 Eagles were lights out.
Jones gets sacked again.
Philly recorded 70 sacks, tied for the 3rd most ever in a single season. The Eagles had 4 pass rushers with 11 or more sacks, just mind-boggling. In turn, they produced the NFL's top pass defense. How about the other side of the ball? Well, Jalen Hurts was an MVP candidate as they mauled the competition with a league-best 32 rushing scores. The Eagles finished 14-3 with 8 Pro Bowlers. Pretty darn good. If you're judging by points scored, this is the greatest offense of all time. So why are the 2013 Broncos so low on our list? 2 words: Seattle Seahawks. Denver gave us a dud in Super Bowl 48, getting blown out of the stadium. But let's go back all the way to Week 1.
And for Manning, 7 touchdown passes. He's the 6th man in NFL history to throw 7 in a game.
You may as well have given Peyton the MVP that night. The Sheriff went on to set single-season records for passing yards and touchdowns in 2013. Denver put up 606 total points with a plus 207 differential. They had 5 different players score 10 or more touchdowns. If only that final game had not been a total nightmare. And speaking of Seattle, their first ever trip to the Super Bowl came against the Steelers in 2005. And while they dropped a relatively forgotten game, let's not forget how awesome that team was.
Alexander, wide open. The record is yours.
Running back Shaun Alexander was named NFL MVP, setting a new single-season record with 28 total touchdowns. The Seahawks went 13-3, sporting the league's #1 offense. Their defense was fantastic too, allowing just 5 total rushing touchdowns. This was Mike Holmgren's best team in the Pacific Northwest. Let's travel south for the Dirty Bird Falcons of 1998. A somewhat out-of-nowhere campaign was spearheaded by power back Jamal Anderson.
Trying to go outside, coming inside, and scoring.
Anderson finished second in the NFL with over 1,800 rushing yards. Atlanta went 14-2 with a top 5 scoring offense and defense. Their 44 takeaways were most in the NFL. The Falcons were a complete team that shocked the world in an NFC title game upset against the Vikings, but eventually that magic ran out as Denver dominated in Super Bowl 33. A team chock full of future Hall of Famers and the Offensive Rookie of the Year led the 1973 Vikings to a superb 12-2 season. Fran Tarkenton and Chuck Foreman led the way on offense, while the usual suspects took care of business on D.
The Minnesota defense returned to good health in '73 as they gave up the fewest points in the NFC and the fewest touchdowns in the entire league.
Behind Alan Page, Carl Eller, and Paul Krause, the Vikings allowed just 12 points per game, but Minnesota ran into Don Shula's Miami Machine in Super Bowl VIII, getting crushed 24-7. Coming off their best season in team history, the Seahawks were on a repeat tour in 2014. The Legion of Boom was at its peak, finishing first in pass defense. Seattle allowed the fewest points in the league for the 3rd straight season. All this while Marshawn Lynch powered the NFL's #1 rushing attack.
Some shifty maneuvering, and Peterson tries to strip and stay in bounds. Because if he stayed in bounds, he's going to go all the way.
The Hawks needed a miracle in the NFC Championship game to get past Green Bay, but alas, they were on to Super Bowl 49 where they faced the Patriots in perhaps the greatest Super Bowl ever, just a few yards away from a potential dynasty. Another team going for back-to-back Lombardis here, as the '97 Packers featured the league's best quarterback.
Far to the end zone. Touchdown!
Green Bay went 13-3 in 1997, boasting a top 5 scoring offense and defense. One of the best secondaries in the league allowed just 10 passing touchdowns. Brett Favre won his 3rd consecutive MVP, throwing an NFL-high 35 touchdowns. The NFC had no answers for the Pack as they cruised to Super Bowl 32 as heavy favorites against Denver. But that's why they play the games. John Elway and Terrell Davis pulled off the upset, ending Green Bay's repeat bid. One of the most entertaining teams of all time, the Carolina Panthers, gave us a show in 2015.
Newton on the quarterback draw, diving into the end zone for the touchdown.
Led by MVP Cam Newton, the Panthers finished 15-1, their best record in team history. Newton totaled 45 touchdowns, easily the most in the league. Carolina had 10 Pro Bowlers and 6 All-Pros on the roster. The Panthers had an NFL best plus 192 point differential and plus 20 in turnovers. They were the class of the league all season, but fell apart in Super Bowl 50. Von Miller tormented the MVP as Carolina fell 24-10. They had the 1st-ranked scoring offense, the 3rd-ranked scoring defense, and 9 Pro Bowlers. The 1978 Cowboys were one of the greatest teams ever.
Roger looks, fires it out there, caught, touchdown, Cowboys!
Roger Staubach was at his best, leading the league in passer rating. Tom Landry's defense ranked 1st against the run and gave up just 13 points per game. This team had 11 future Hall of Famers, including players, coaches, and front office personnel. Super Bowl 13 was a heavyweight clash, but Dallas ran out of time in a 35-31 loss to the Steelers. It's been 40 years, and we're still talking about Dan Marino's 1984 season. That's how insane it really was.
He's out of the 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown!
The second-year quarterback shattered single-season records with 5,084 passing yards and 48 touchdowns. Meanwhile, receiver Mark Clayton set a record with 18 receiving scores. Miami finished 14-2, scoring 32 points per game. Don Shula's team featured 8 Pro Bowlers and outclassed the competition on the way to Super Bowl 19, but the 49ers made Marino look human, winning 38-16. Just how good were the 1967 Oakland Raiders? Well, they went 13-1, outscoring their opponents by 235 points. They averaged over 33 points per game, still a franchise single-season record.
Quarterback Darryl LaMonica was named the league's most valuable player, and 11 other Raiders were selected to various all-league teams.
Quarterback Darryl LaMonica threw an AFL-high 30 touchdowns, winning Player of the Year. They also had the best total defense in all of pro football and had 12 players named to the AFL All-Star team. Could they do the unthinkable and defeat the mighty Packers in Super Bowl II? Sadly, no. The NFL reigned supreme again as Oakland was toppled 33-14. Buffalo's 1990 squad was no doubt the best of the bunch during that AFC Championship streak. Introducing the K-Gun offense, the Bills paced the NFL in scoring.
Home run ball, timing looks good. It's on target to James Lofton.
Jim Kelly led the league in passer rating, while Thurman Thomas racked up the most yards from scrimmage. And oh yeah, Bruce Smith, Defensive Player of the Year. This Bills team was stacked, sending 10 players to the Pro Bowl, but the Giants had the antidote in Super Bowl 25. They kept the ball away from Kelly and company, winning the closest Super Bowl of all time on a missed Scott Norwood kick. Okay, we're on to the best of the best now. Coming in at number 5 are the 1969 Vikings. Their first ever Super Bowl team held opponents to 10 or fewer points in 9 different games. That's on the level of the 2000 Ravens.
Page, attempting to block for Marshall, wound up scoring himself as the Vikings swept their 10th straight.
Minnesota allowed just 8 passing touchdowns and recorded 30 interceptions. And get this, they also scored 27 points per game, the most in the NFL. But in one of the biggest upsets in history, the underdog Chiefs from the AFL stunned the Vikings 23-7 in Super Bowl IV. From a legendary defense to one of the most high-powered offenses ever, we get to the 2001 St. Louis Rams.
What a catch by Holt!
Behind two-time MVP Kurt Warner, the Rams led the NFL in scoring at over 31 points per game. Warner topped the league in passing yards, touchdowns, and rating, and don't forget Marshall Faulk, the Offensive Player of the Year. All he did was amass over 2,100 yards from scrimmage and score a league-high 21 touchdowns. This team went 14-2 with 5 future Hall of Famers, but even the greatest show on turf couldn't find the answer to Bill Belichick's defense. Despite the Rams' last-ditch comeback attempt, the Patriots hung on to a 2017 shocker. Who's ready for a ridiculous stat? Washington's 1983 team had a plus 43 turnover differential. We kid you not. Joe Gibbs and company finished 14-2 with 7 All-Pros.
Pass long, and this one is a touchdown to Garrett.
Joe Theismann was the NFL MVP, and John Riggins scored the most rushing touchdowns in the league. It's no wonder this unit ranked first in scoring offense. Counting Gibbs, Washington had 5 future Hall of Famers on the team. So what exactly happened in Super Bowl 18? Well, Marcus Allen and the Raiders ran roughshod. Theismann and Riggins were neutralized, and Washington lost 38-9. It's no surprise we're on a roll of upsets this high up on the list, but our number 2 selection suffered perhaps the most surprising loss in Super Bowl history. The 1968 Colts were more than a powerhouse, they were one of the greatest teams ever assembled.
A year in which a 33-year-old bench warmer became a 34-year-old hero.
You know the team is loaded when the backup quarterback comes in and wins NFL MVP. Earl Morrall took over for Johnny Unitas and threw the most touchdown passes in the league. The Colts finished first in scoring defense, second in offense, and recorded a plus 258-point differential. Don Shula's 13-1 squad had 8 players named to the Pro Bowl, but even he wasn't ready for what was to come in Super Bowl III. Led by a bold guarantee by quarterback Joe Namath, the AFL's New York Jets pulled off the unthinkable in a 16-7 win. Okay, we've made it to the end, and the number 1 team should come as a surprise to absolutely no one.
This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable.
The 2007 Patriots weren't fair. The first team ever to finish the regular season 16-0 outscored their opponents by 315 points. That's an NFL record that may not be topped for a while. New England scored nearly 37 points per game. Tom Brady became the first player to throw 50 touchdowns in a single season, and Randy Moss set a record with 23 touchdown catches. 8 Pro Bowlers and 5 All-Pros, but we know the story of how this magical season finished. Brady was flustered by the Giants' pass rush in Super Bowl 42, Eli Manning and David Tyree connected on the helmet catch, and New York spoiled what was nearly a perfect season.